Greetings and welcome to another edition of the, hold on one second, let me get my levels right, of the Robert Phoenix Show. This is 15 Minutes of Flame. What's happening out there in the great big wild, just hold on a second. Great big wild, wide, wonderful world. Hey, I wish I had the applause effect so I could just rip off a hearty round of applause. It's pretty dark here in Austin today on the 25th of September. As we move now rapidly through the sign of Libra, the moon today is in Sagittarius. The moon is in Sagittarius. Be willing to express your truth at an emotional level. And certainly, Mr. Trump, the President of the United States, has done so in a very, how should I say this? Let me just turn my level back up here. Here we go. Good. Yes, I think we're good. He has done so in a very direct way. I think a lot of this has to do, and I'm not going to make an excuse for Trump, but I think a lot of it has to do with the sense of overriding frustration and not being able to theoretically get things done. He had Obamacare get ripped away from the Republicans, or by him from the Republicans, and John McCain, and he's been having to joust with Kim Jong-un, and I'm sure not being able to fire some missiles or drop a bomb might actually, have some correlation with sexual frustration. You know what I mean? Like, you can't consummate it, like you can't make it happen. So there's this building up of this sort of tension and frustration. And it's got to come out somewhere. So it came out against the NBA and the NFL yesterday. And I'm going to read you a few things here. And I'm going to show you sort of where all of this started, okay? I'm going to show you where it all started. And I'm going to give you kind of what I think is happening. And I talked about this last night on the live stream, in case you haven't seen it. And, it's pretty relevant, the live stream. Talk about the week ahead. You can find that over on YouTube. I'll be putting that up on my website today. But one of the things Trump has managed to do is he's managed to become a uniter, because what you had prior to his missile launch onto the NFL and the NBA, what you had a small group of players who were taking a knee because they felt that there was a sense of police brutality and a directed aggression towards their community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I said on last night's show is that all of a sudden now the great divider has become the great uniter, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about. And, I'm not necessarily sure if this is all part of fifth dimensional underwater chess. But, and I told the story about the hockey coach last night on the live stream, Herb Brooks, who basically alienated all the players, or at least pushed all the players on the 1976, I think it was the 1976 hockey team. And they all kind of united together because of Herb Brooks was a brutal taskmaster. I mean, he rode these players hard, and it paid off because they had such a team unity. And they connected with some of the assistant coaches, who of course were the good cops, and Herb Brooks was the bad cop. And it was effective. I mean, they won the gold medal. And I believe it was in upstate New York where they had the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. So that was a key strategy, and Herb Brooks was clearly conscious and aware about what he was doing. And another coach, Bill Walsh, who used to coach for the 49ers, did the same thing. He did the same thing. He'd get the players to kind of not have a warm and fuzzy feeling about him. He also had the players not have a warm and fuzzy feeling towards the media. And so what he had this group who were insulated, and together as a team, they were united as one. And unless you're the Oakland A's but even the Oakland A's from the 1970s, who were the biggest bunch of misfits ever, even they were united. They were united against the owner, Charles O. Finlay. So it's this strange kind of unification through polarization, not duality, but polarization, and polarization against another figure, in this case, i.e. Trump. I'll read you an article, part of an article, and I'll read you one. This is from the National Post, and I'm going to read you. This is by the author. I have to read the author's name, Scott Stinson. I'm not going to read you the whole article, but let me read you one paragraph that nails it here. Let me see if I can just find it. Okay, here's the paragraph. He says that Trump has found a receptive audience for his ranting is not a surprise. That's another staple of our times. There is always an audience for his rantings. But the NFL has pushed back so significantly, as is at least somewhat unexpected. This is a league run by exceedingly wealthy men, several of whom proudly call Trump a friend, who donated millions to his political cause. In this one way, the most divisive president in history has finally managed to be a uniter. This is what I was talking about last night. Again, I don't know if this is a strategy that he's rolling out because he actually wants to unite people. Although it would be very interesting if that were the case. Or maybe it's just an effect. Maybe it's just an effect of what happens to be a very polarizing situation. Now, apparently, Patriot fans in New England were not happy with their team, as some of them locked arms, some of them knelt, and they rained booze down upon the players on the field. Same thing happened in Indianapolis. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds as the rest of the season rolls out in ragged glory with the NFL's ratings down, and we'll see what happens to the fans in attendance. Now, I'm going to bring something up from Trump's past, which is really worth noting, and whether or not he has a bit of a vindictive streak. Because Donald Trump used to own a professional football team. It was the New Jersey Generals, and they played in a league called the United States Football League, and they were actually a very successful team. Trump spent a lot of money. He got the biggest stars. He got Herschel Walker to sign from college, and Herschel Walker was an amazing player at that time. And Trump was locked in a league-wide battle with another owner by the name of John Bassett, who owned a team out of, I believe it was Florida or Memphis. It was Memphis. John Bassett lived in Florida, and he had a team in Memphis. And, I think it might have been the Tampa Bandits. I think it was the Bandits. I think that was Bassett's team. He did have a connection with Memphis. It might have been in an earlier incarnation with the WFL. Anyway, Bassett was one of these guys who was universally loved and beloved by his players. He was a buddy of Burt Reynolds, and Reynolds lionized John Bassett. And Bassett was the guy who was the sort of the league counterpoint to Donald Trump at an ownership level. And Bassett really wanted to establish the United States Football League as a summer option, a viable summer option. He did not. That's when they played. He didn't want to take the USFL. He didn't want to take the NFL on, at least not directly. He wanted to, build a structure that could be an alternative entertainment portal and vehicle, and he wanted to keep costs down. That was a really important piece. Trump, on the other hand, had no such desire and was kind of in a pissing match between him and Bassett. And some of the owners were aligned with Trump because they thought Trump being wildly successful in dating, having Ivana Trump as his wife, his beautiful wife, and later on Marla Maples. They thought Trump was the sweet smell of success, and if they aligned with him, that their wish could be granted and that their team would be given a place and a spot to play in the NFL on Sundays. And this was Trump's vision. And there was basically a standoff until John Bassett got really sick with brain cancer and died. So Trump's biggest rival in the USFL was no longer in the picture, at which point Trump put the pedal to the metal. He got all the other owners to get behind him. And basically, they decided to suspend play for the USFL, and then the whole idea would have been to start a fall season and get into the NFL and take the NFL on directly. This was Trump. This was Mars in the first house, and it didn't happen. The league ran out of money. Donald Trump and the rest of the league sued the NFL for antitrust, an antitrust breach, meaning that they were controlling who and what could be part of the league and using tax dollars, et cetera, to be a form of leverage in that position for the NFL, not the USFL. And Trump won. Trump and the USFL won, but the jury essentially awarded the league $1 plus legal expenses, which were about 67 cents. So Donald Trump and the USFL got $1.67 for their judgment. It was a brutal, in some ways, defeat for Trump, and yet, ironically, the NFL should be thanking Donald Trump because Donald Trump essentially took a nuclear bomb to the USFL and destroyed their rival league. And nobody really remembers this, but it's true. The NFL should be thanking Trump because what happened then is all the players who were in the USFL went into a draft and they came into the NFL and they became stars. Steve Young became a Super Bowl hero for the San Francisco 49ers. Reggie White became a Super Bowl hero for the Green Bay Packers. And I can run off a list of about at least another dozen players. Jim Kelly came in and led the Buffalo Bills to 3 Super Bowls in a row, even though they didn't win. You get my point here. The NFL greatly benefited from whatever Trump was doing over on the USFL side. Now, Trump, I believe, has a side which is vindictive. And perhaps he's remembering what the NFL and the ownership of the NFL did to him as an owner of a team in the USFL. And that $1.76 he got as a check. And now his goal at this point, which unintendedly is uniting people, might be to destroy the NFL. I wouldn't put it past him. I just wouldn't. And the thing is, right, here's what Trump is bringing to the party. You just better get used to it until, if for some reason they decide that they're going to run him out or run their second election, and Hillary Clinton, who's basically doing a pre-second election press tour with her book. You know that's what's happening, right? She's traveling all around the country. She's got her stupid-ass book, What Happened? She can't take responsibility for the loss. Do you know who can't take responsibility for what they do in life? Sociopaths. Sociopaths. It's always somebody else's fault. Always something. Sociopaths and children. See, children experience the same thing. No, it was their fault. It was their fault. It's not my fault. It's their fault. At some point, a child learns to take responsibility for their actions. It's kind of, because the metaphor here is a weed, okay, in a garden. A child, a person, is a garden. Now, some weeds are beneficial. Like, you got to have a few weeds every now and then, right? But if your garden is overrun by weeds, what do you have? You've got a weedy mess that can't produce anything. I know some weeds are edible, whatever, it's fine. But if you want a really good, productive garden that grows things and it looks pleasing to the eye, you got to pull the weeds out. right? And the weeds are beliefs and attitudes and emotions that keep the garden from growing. Really basic, simple metaphors for life. So we have children in their gardens, and we help them weed their garden. We get them to spot things. You see this, you pull it out. When you see this, you pull it out because you don't want to let it grow. You let it grow, and guess what? It'll super pollinate. The next thing you know, you're going to be overrun with this shit, and then you won't be able to have a productive garden in life. Apparently, Hillary never got the weeding lesson. And so what she did is she grew up and evolved into a sociopath. And that's just the way it is. That's the way it is. So this is a very interesting kind of piece that's happening with Trump and the NFL and this strange polarization. And but again, Trump is here to be a deconstructive force. He lives in a tower, right? That's the tower card. The tower is an energy that is destructive. It's destructive. And we're looking at our institutions and just how, clean, how whole, how resonant they are or aren't. Now, me, on a personal level, look, first of all, you got to get to the root cause, right? The wars that are supposedly being stood up for and recognized and honored by the players who are warriors for other warriors, there's a connection there, right? And football is a war sport. It's a war sport. You can look at the evolution of sports in this country based on the country itself. Baseball is an agrarian sport. It's connected to an older time, a time without time. Football is a post-World War II sport. That's when it takes off. So it is a post-war sport, and it allows us to project our feelings of anger, violence, loyalty, all those things that are representative of team and country onto those particular individuals in the team. And we get to work out this kind of major psychological function, most of which has been empowered, by the way, by the powers that be, because they allow us to blow off steam and don't turn our aggressive energies onto them when they fuck us over. See how that works? Basketball is an urban sport. It's an urban sport. And it is the post-war sport. And I don't know what's past basketball, but I said this on last night's show, that we're taking now a very hard look at football and what it means in our lives. It became deeply associated with the military in 9/11, and I had a real hard time with this. I'm sorry, not even 9/11. I take that back. Although 9/11 did play a role, don't get me wrong. We have to go all the way back to Gulf War I, which was an absolutely ridiculous war, a war that was fought to basically gain a foothold into the oil fields of southern Iraq and Iraq's neighbor. And it was a war that the United States had given Saddam Hussein a green light. Saddam Hussein was given a green light by April Glaspie to go in and deal with the Kuwaitis, right? Because the Kuwaitis were slam drilling the Iraqis. This is what was happening. The slam drill is when you take an oil drill and you angle it and you don't go straight down. So the Kuwaitis were slam drilling into Iraqi oil, and Saddam Hussein didn't dig it. And he said he asked April Glaspie, who was at that time the diplomat to Iraq from the United States, and said, look, we may have to take aggressive action towards the Kuwaitis because they're slam drilling our fields. And April Glaspie said, we don't have a problem with that. We'll stay out of this. And then he slam drilled the fields, and of course that was the pretext. Oh my God, look what he's doing to the Kuwaitis. And we had all this bullshit about Saddam Hussein and gassing babies. It's always about the babies. And he had been on the cover of Time magazine, in Newsweek magazine during the summer of 1989, 1990. It was the summer of 1990. The most dangerous man in the world. There's the pre-programming that happens And then we went after him. We had Gulf War I. And of course, who's there to sell it? It's the NFL. It's the NFL. Remember Whitney Houston singing before the Super Bowl? The Giants versus the Bills, and the great display of might in armature. The jet fighters roaring over the stadium while Whitney Houston blasted out the national anthem. Remember that? That's kind of when it all started. That's when the militarization and the politicalization of football began. But there's another chapter here, and one that's really important to bring up and understand. And this is from Town Hall. I'm going to read you this story. This is by Timothy Meads. It was posted yesterday. And it goes like this, starts like this. President Donald J. Trump doubled down his rhetoric against the National Football League players who refused to stand for the national anthem on Sunday morning, but fans should be reminded that the NFL's patriotism is relatively new in the league. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell claims that the NFL and players are at our best when we help create a sense of unity in our country and our culture, but their weekly show of support towards members of the American military began only after NFL owners realized they could make money off of it. In 2009, Barack Obama's Department of Defense began paying hundreds of thousands towards teams and a marketing strategy designed to show support for the troops and increase recruitments. The NFL then required all players and personnel to be on the sidelines during the national anthem in exchange for taxpayer dollars. Prior, the national anthem was played in the stadium, but players had the option of staying in the locker room before heading out to the field. Furthermore, teams that showed veteran salutes during games were paid upwards of $5.1 million. So if you held a veteran salute, you got a bonus. The NFL has shown degrees of patriotism at different times, such as after 9/11, that's right. But as Senator Jeff Flake noted in 2015, those of us go to sporting events and see the team honoring the heroes. You get a good feeling in your heart. I never got a good feeling in my heart because they were honoring the heroes, because I knew that the wars that we were fighting were built on mountains of bullshit. Then to find out they're doing it because they're compensated for it leaves you underwhelmed. It seems a little unseemly. You gotta be kidding me. This guy's a politician. You know, they take baths in unseemly. President Donald Trump is encouraging fans boycott the NFL. The league refuses to back the U.S. President Trump sparked a national controversy on Friday night when he said the NFL owners should get that son of a bitch off the field if a player is not standing for the flag as a way of showing protest against police brutality. This garnered strong responses from NFL owners across the league, from teams such as the San Francisco 49ers, Green Bay Packers, Miami Dolphins, and Atlanta Falcons. Most notably, though, was the condemnation from Trump's longtime friend and five-time Super Bowl champion, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. Kraft said he was deeply disappointed in the tone used by the president. Shortly after President Trump's early Sunday morning tweets, players and coaches from the Ravens and the Jacksonville Jaguars sent a defiant message to the commander-in-chief during the national anthem at the annual international game played in London, England. The two teams linked arms with many players kneeling. And then, you know what those guys did? They stood for God Save the Queen. It's not even their country. Oh my God. I mean, how amazing is this, right? How amazing is this? Because, of course, then we get into the narrative of the city of London, and everybody is an entity of the corporation, and that we have no rights, we have no identity, we have nothing, everything is granted and bestowed upon us, and we do it willfully and through our own consent when we sign up for a license, which is licentious, and it all emanates from the city of London, and there we have the crown and the queen, and she sits there and she says, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. I have prevailed. Our crown has prevailed. We now rule completely over our colony, the former United the former United States of America, because we are far from united. Although, again, as I mentioned earlier, Trump is doing a very good job uniting people in a very kind of inverse sort of way. But clearly, that is a moment for the Queen where she says everything is working according to plan. Now, here's what I think. I mean, I think maybe it would be good if we took a break from the NFL. Although I do have 2 fantasy football teams, Dungeons and Dragons for jocks. But I think it would be it might be good for us to take a break from the NFL. Take Sundays off. Do something different. You know, I think it might be the time to do that. Maybe it's time to lay this thing down for a while. You know, it's so charged. And a lot of people's lives are charged. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the fans. Because I can tell you right now who buys tickets for NFL games, which are not cheap, by the way. The majority of the fans who buy tickets for NFL games have been season ticket holders for a very long time. They're generational. In most NFL stadiums, you have to buy what's called a personal seat license, which gives you the right to buy a ticket. How about that? You can't even just buy a ticket. You can't even just buy a ticket, a season ticket. You have to buy the right to buy the ticket, and then you can buy the ticket, which gives you like the right to own that seat. Now, you may not have season tickets, but with the personal seat license, that can be your seat. You just can't go there. You basically paid for that seat, and then you pay on top of it. Most of the stadiums are subsidized by state governments with some federal money thrown in. So your tax dollars have gone to ultra-rich owners with the promise that their stadium will bring jobs, will bring a renewal to certain areas where an economic impact theoretically would be a welcome shot in the arm, an economic steroid to the community, using an NFL term. And in some cases, perhaps this might be true, but in most cases they have found that when stadiums are built, guess what? We lose money. We lose money. So we're subsidizing these stadiums. And I'll give you another little factoid. The NFL has all kinds of practices, including being tax exempt. Now that's right. Not only are they tax exempt, but they can also use players as a way to, how do I say this? They can use players and their degrading status as a way to buffer any kind of future tax hit against the team. So if a player status is degrading, they can basically use it as the same way that a property is degrading. And then when you make an improvement to the property, you can somehow claim that as keeping the property in order. And I believe you can use that on your tax form, although I've never really owned a property that long to fully examine it. But I believe that's the case. In any case, the owners can use the players any way they want. It's a great scam. Owning a sports team, is like printing money. I have no love lost for these owners. None whatsoever. None. But there's a certain hypocrisy that's involved in all of this. You know, there was a guy who plays for the Tennessee Titans, and his name is Avery Williamson. And in September 2016, he wanted to wear a pair of cleats to honor the fallen victims of 9/11 because he had a relative that died in the Twin Towers. And he had these cleats that said 9/11, never forget. And he wanted to wear them because last year the season opened on 9/11. Sunday was 9/11. But he backed off when a league rep vowed to fine him for violating the league's uniform code. That's Merton Hanks, used to play for 49ers. The left cleat says 9/11/01 with the 11 in the outline of the Twin Towers, of course. Well, the right one says never forget. I don't want to draw negative attention, so I'm just going to focus on playing the game, Williamson told the Tennessee newspaper on Friday. So here's a guy that wanted to show his patriotism, and not in a way that would be divisive, but in a way where he honored the people that died there. And Paul Nunziato, the head of the Port Authority Police Benevolent Association, this is what he had to say. I'm making a goal line stand on this. Nice, Paul. Enough is enough. The NFL is out of bounds. Oh, Paul. Paul mixing some metaphors up there. He's making a goal line stand and the NFL is out of bounds. He said Commissioner Roger Goodell, by denying Williamson the right to wear patriotic fore, committed a personal foul against humanity. I think Paul's in the wrong business. Paul should be writing press copy or doing his own podcast. This guy, Williamson, was hoping to honor everyone who died on 9/11, no matter what their country or color. So the NFL also has a history of denying. Again, I am not going to run out and bang the drum for the military, because I know the story about most of the wars, and they're almost all complete and utter bullshit. Okay? So this narrative that we fought in order to keep our freedom, maybe the only one that we really engaged in to that degree was World War II, and we wound up, I didn't say we fought the wrong country, but what we should have done is then we should have turned on the Soviets at that point in time and taken them on, which is what George Patton wanted to do, to take on the Russians, because the Russians dominated Europe and have still dominated Europe to a large degree for the rest of the 20th century and part of the 21st century. Clearly, their political polemic, whether it's behind a wall or on the other side of it, became the dominant organizing system for Europe, East and West, Central, from that point forward. But the rest of the wars, you just go one by one, and we can just tear them apart, disassemble them, and just show you how they're really bankers' wars. And that's who we've been fighting for all this time, under the guise of freedom and patriotism. So if we really want to get to the bottom of everything, if we really want to get to the bottom of the divisive nature of the protests and the patriotism that is forced upon us as a result of this, we should get to the bottom of war. And we should get to the bottom of who wants us to fight the wars and for what reason. This would be the greatest intellectual and social act of discourse that we could have. People like Michael Bennett and Colin Kaepernick, they say that they want to open a dialogue. They say that they want to address things like social change. But in most cases, they only want to do so when it fits their narrative or the specific agenda that is generated by a community with an agenda, or a group that has an agenda for that matter. But if they really wanted to put their sporting, that's what I'm looking for, I just had it top of my head, man. If they really wanted to take their popularity and notoriety and put it to good use, then they would open the dialogue to such an extent that it would include everyone. They would ask really important questions like why we fight and who we fight for. Because when we do that, very difficult questions are asked. And at that point, we have to really address our own assumptions and our own bias. Not at one point did any NFL player during the 8 years that Barack Obama was president of the United States step out onto a field and kneel because every Tuesday, the Obama administration, it was either Tuesday or Thursday, I forget which day it was, had to make a series of drone runs and drone kills. and the amount of deaths that took place in places like Afghanistan, northern Iraq, Libya, Syria were unprecedented. Unprecedented. And Obama became a closet war president. And never at any point was that ever addressed. Because it was secret, it was hidden, it was cloaked. It was carried out just like the soulless assassination programs of the drones themselves, guided by somebody sipping a double latte in a bunker somewhere in NORAD or Virginia or someplace where they're piloting these drones. Nobody ever took a knee for that. Not once. Nobody ever took a knee for what happened in Benghazi, because our administration, through Hillary Clinton and her porous server, gave notice to the rebels in Libya that not only was the embassy vulnerable, but there was an arms exchange taking place. Americans died, and they died on 9/11. That's when Benghazi happened on 9/11, right? Nobody ever took a knee for that. Nobody ever decried the fact that through Hillary Clinton's server, we put the country at great risk as they launched a covert war from her server. Nobody ever took a knee for that. And the reason why they didn't take a knee for that, and I'm sorry, but most football players and athletes in general tend to be easily led. Easily led. Very few of them have the real ability to be individuals and to stand back and say, this is wrong. You're wrong here. This is really what's taking place. Because to do so would be, guess what? It would jeopardize their career and their earning power. And there have been cases of athletes who have spoken up against certain things, and they lost their contracts. Kurt Schilling to be one of them. He wasn't an athlete, but he took an unpopular stand, and he lost his deal with ESPN. Now he's got a podcast on Breitbart. But if athletes really want to get involved in the political process, if they really want to understand the hidden history and the hidden hand behind the very same sport that they're actually participating in ownership and the tax benefits and how the owners got the teams, then I would say go for it. Become informed. Because when you become informed, it's not such an easy thing to simply take a knee because of some reactionary stance based on a tweet that the guy in the White House put out. And if you really think about it, if you really, really think about it, Trump is trolling the entire NFL. He's trolling all the players. And they're doing exactly what he probably thought they would do. And in which case they are just dancing to his tune, even though they think they're taking an original and individual response. These are very interesting times. Absolutely. And, not everybody has the time or the inclination to get in and deconstruct this stuff. Apparently I have way too much of both. But this is what we do here every day from 9 o'clock a.m. to right about now. Maybe sometimes a little bit longer. So if you like what you're hearing and believe that it's kind of a fresh take on the world, this reality matrix that we're in, I suggest share it with somebody else. Let's see if we can get up from our 300 listens on YouTube. The next goal is 500. I'm setting goals this year. Let's get to 500. We're going to crank it out. So with the moon in Sagittarius this week, a really fresh moon, just coming off the new moon. It's really good to be able to have an emotional response that is authentic, that is honest. But watch out, the moon in Sagittarius can also be zealotous and ideological. And if you get too far in that direction, it turns people off. Just like the NFL and its players are doing with their protests. And even to some degree, our president, commander-in-chief, who's doing the same, politicizing just about everything under the sun. So take refuge in your own emotional expression. Be honest. Be forthright. But also express a little empathy and compassion while you're doing it. Because remember, when you point one finger at somebody, there's 3 more pointing back at you. I'll be back tomorrow, 24 hours from today. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix. Use your head to discern what's real.